Good evening. You're listening to Beyond Ordinary News Radio on YouTube channels Dark Sky Watcher 74 and Beyond Ordinary News. You may subscribe to us here and on my personal Facebook page at www.facebook.com/Denise.Chavez333. This is your host, Denise Chavez, and my guests tonight are Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin. They are going to talk about the Anunnaki and their role in the creation and manipulation of humanity. Dr. Lessin holds a PhD in anthropology from UCLA and is the author of many works, notably the book Anunnaki, Gods No More. He is the producer of the popular website www.nkispeaks.com and studied with the late Zecharia Sitchin for several years. Mr. Sitchin asked Lessin to create a popular internet website, a book, and college-level courses in order to revise ancient anthropology. Sitchin specifically asked Dr. Lessin to assist with the dissemination of written, graphic, and traditional stories of extraterrestrials considered mythic gods on Earth from 450,000 to 300 BC, as well as the latest findings in astronomy relating to the planet Nibiru, from which the extraterrestrials came to Earth for gold to shield their planet. Janet Kira Lessin is a lifelong scholar and experiencer of extraterrestrial contacts and is a student of Sitchin as well. She is the voice of Ninma consciousness and is dedicated to bringing the wisdom of Ninma to the world. She has co-authored Anunnaki, Legacy of the Gods with Dr. Lessin. Together, the Lessins take us through an evocative history of giants from the planet Nibiru. They share evidence that these giants created humans from their genome work for themselves, from the ancient past until now. This information, they say, frees us from the God spell, the nation spell, the materialist spell, the master-slave, God-devotee, boss-worker, landlord-tenant model that the ETs from planet Nibiru imposed upon us. Our true history allows us the freedom to create our own future, activate our latent Nibiruan genes, better our genetic material, and join the galactic civilization. Now, without further ado, here are Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lessin. Welcome to the show, Janet and Sasha.
Aloha. Thanks for having us on the show today.
Aloha. So happy to have you guys here today.
We're very glad to be here.
Well, quite the complex and controversial topic, the Anunnaki, yes?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and it's complex, but it resonates with something we're all familiar with. Once we get into it, you'll see.
Absolutely. Well, why is the Anunnaki story so controversial?
Well, it's really the story that's recorded in the Bible that most people on this planet have read or heard of anyway. And it's the story, except it's going back to the earliest sources, the Sumerians who recorded what these great big guys that said they came from another planet told them. And that's the story that's, through various cultural lenses come down to us in various traditions as the Bible and other sources. And once we understand the reality that these, what our ancestors called gods, were just great big people, tall people like us, except they had rocket ships and laser guns and stuff like that. And they were geneticists, and they added a few genes from a local hominoid, the Neanderthal's ancestor, and made these slave workers, that's us, and then they kept pitting us against each other and dumbing us down so that we wouldn't realize we were being exploited. And then when most of them left, they left some of their kids here, their half-breeds, and they're still running things. And it's time that we looked at the reality now that we know about space travel, now that we can see the evidence that the maps these guys gave us of the stars and the planets beyond what we could see with our naked eyes, of the landmass underneath the Antarctic, which they saw during the Great Flood, and all the things they told us have great predictive value. They also told us a bunch of lies, and they were all trying to put their rivals down, the other gods, and get. But now our truth means that we don't have to keep fighting these gods wars against each other. And these are hierarchical one-upsman people who degraded women.
I agree with everything you said. Yeah, the Anunnaki are our fathers. Particularly, we have Enki, who is the father of humanity, and his sister, half-sister, Nimma, and they were geneticists, and they were the ones that, I don't know if they came up with the idea, but they definitely made it what happened. I think it was the council. Was that how it worked? The council decided that they...
Well, what happened
who
was
introduced
that...
the idea?
Oh, it's like Enki deliberately manipulated... They were miners. They came from the planet Nibiru to get gold here on Earth 450,000 years ago and ship back and float up in their atmosphere as monoatomic gold. Anyway, so they had these great big tall guys, 8 to 12 feet high, were digging in the mines in South Africa, the gold mines, and they rebelled. They mutinied, but Enki, the scientist, had manipulated them because he was a geneticist and he was doing these experiments. Having it ready so that he could make an adaptation of their genome to Earth, make short-term disposable workers, that's us, and he was just having so much fun with this and so forth. And so it was against the orders, but he did it anyway, and he manipulated it so he could create us. And then some of the girls that he created in this breeding experiment turned him on, and he kept breeding with them more and more until we get down to his son Noah, as one of his sons with one of the Earthlings, who he made sure didn't get wiped out, even though the commander wanted us all wiped out because it was against the laws of galactic settlement that there should be a slave race. But we were a slave race, and the king of Nibiru basically sent Enki and Nimma and Thoth, their son, back and say, take care of these people. Don't let them perish, and the people, the half-breeds we left behind with their pernicious system, persist in ruining this beautiful experiment with these conscious beings.
Right. So we were a genetic experiment, and we still are, and they loved playing with DNA. So DNA was like their paints, and they mixed them and combined them. That's why you have what are they called? Chimeras. We have these centaurs, minotaurs, cyclops, all kinds of creatures. And actually, I found online yesterday on YouTube, I forgot to tell you, honey, the skulls of the cyclops, and they're trying to say, oh, that was some kind of birth defect. But we have stories of the Anunnaki and how they purposely created all these creatures, and they were playing with our DNA until they came up with a form that worked best. And we are it. We are the result of their experiment, and we are most easily manipulated and controlled, but we are intelligent enough to do their bidding, to do their deeds, and they are the power elite that control humanity to this day. However, I must say there are two factions. There, and there was one of the brothers. There were three siblings: Enlil, Enki, and Nimma. And Enlil, I don't want to paint anybody as like an absolute terrible, bad person, but Enlil had his own agenda, and he definitely...
He was a genocidal maniac.
He was a genocidal...
Right, yes.
He did not... he kind of looks his nose down on humanity, thinks that we're just more like animals, and that, he's God. And so we think that he's the one that's at the top of the pyramid of the all-seeing eye, and he's in control of humanity. And it could be Marduk. So that's the debate amongst all these Anunnaki scholars.
But some think it might also be Nanar, too, his son.
Yeah, so Dr. Lessin might be Nanar. But it seems to be the Enlil faction is the force behind the Illuminati. And they basically are the 1%, to use the analogy of the Occupy movement, and we are the 99%. And so we're all corporate economic slaves. They control money, all the wealth, and they have all the power and control. They're behind all the CEOs and business and the oil and all the governments. And no matter where you go, you think you have freedom. There they are. They are it, and we are just being manipulated, much like Orwell outlined in the novel 1984, but I don't think it's required reading anywhere. I recommend everybody read Orwell's 1984 or watch one of the movies. We are living in the New World Order, the Orwellian society, where everything, now we're becoming aware that we're being watched at every moment, and
we've been mind programmed from the beginning in order to keep the human race enslaved, correct?
Absolutely. What they decided after the Great Flood, that they would rule through the sons of Noah, Shem, Japheth, and Ham, And they would be the kings, and that's how they would rule. But they would be worshipped as gods, and the taking care of them in their daily life, like feeding them and bathing them and so forth, became like their rituals. Now these guys on top, these great big guys, were murderous people who were so obsessed with their genealogies, just like King Henry VIII and our royals, where they would kill each other. They kill their brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, everybody, kids. These people were pathological murderers, and they came from a planet that had almost wiped itself out in thermonuclear war, and they finally had a king who ruled with a military dictatorship, and this is the model they brought to Earth. And this is, and so their chief scientist who went along there was motivated by something much bigger, and it was another forces that came in called the Galzu that basically said, this is not acceptable. This is slavery. There's these beautiful, inspiring creatures here. Let them develop. Stop pitting them against each other and having them ruin the planet and kill each other off. This is not acceptable. And then there's the people in charge that are saying, no, what we have to do is we have to bomb. They had a launch tower at Babylon, the so-called Tower of Babel. It was a launch tower. Marduk and the Earthlings were going to do a counter raid on Nibiru and take back their freedom. But in any case, this was bombed out, and what the council, Enlil, Yahweh, decided, keep their languages separate, keep them divided against each other. Don't let them get too educated. There's millions of them, and there's less than 1,000 of us. Divide and conquer. And that's what we've been faced with. But the truth is that when you really look at things and how things got done, the saving grace every time were the women that would not let these egomaniacs totally kill everybody.
Yes, and Nimma was the primary peacekeeper, and we have to bring her back to the forefront because she's been forgotten. I want to address the mind control. On the highest level of creation, of course, we're all equal. But we're down here in the hologram. This matrix is a artificial construct that we as a group on a soul level are creating. So that's the play. We're in this play, and this is the theater. And so here we are. But within that, we've got the two factions that have the greater awareness of the history of this planet Earth and of the cosmos, and that's the Anunnaki. And they have, enslaved humanity because it was illegal to do a slave race. And we are being enslaved by many methods. One of the primary methods of enslavement is religion. When they discovered, when we started breeding like crazy, and during Noah's flood, Enlil said just let them be wiped out, but there were, Noah was Enki's son, and that faction was saved. But we're finding out there were other gods that disobeyed Enlil, and rescued some of their Lulus, we were called. They loved humanity. So there were about 3 or 4 factions that did survive the flood.
In North America, at the top of the Andes, as well as the group on Mount Ararat in Turkey.
So we had the original programming, which is the religions. And so we saw how through the years, if you didn't believe a religion, you were killed. So that was one major way of enforcement. If you didn't follow the politics of the time and the religions of the time that were popular and the ones that the Anunnaki wanted to have as the control mechanisms, you died, fed to lions or burned on the stake, the witches and so forth. So that's one way of controlling. But we're in the modern era of technology, and when movies started coming in and radio, they started putting subliminals in all of our messages. And so we found that was one of the major control mechanisms through the first part of the 20th century. But now we're in the 21st century, and we've got all this mind control and HARP and things coming through our televisions and cell phones and et cetera, et cetera.
They actually did the same thing basically
Airwaves.
When people are in the worship, when they're all chanting together in a place where they're told to worship the Anunnaki. They go into a group trance, and that is mind programming, just the way television's mind programming us. That was the ancients' version of our television.
Well, ritual is important, and it works in both ways. When you go into a trance and your intention is love and high spirituality and consciousness, you can connect all the way to God, Source, and the Divine. But if it's got a satanic ritual and they're doing blood sacrifice, it takes it into another part of the continuum.
So one of the best rituals, however, that we did get from the Anunnaki was Inanna. Had all these temples of love all over Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley, and Uruk, her capital, in ancient Sumer, Iraq. And these were places where what was celebrated was love and making babies consciously. It was a whole different orientation on what we've, in our materialist world, reduced to sexuality.
Right, and that's the origins of Tantra, and Tantra was the first spiritual practice, and it allowed the practitioner and the group they were in to go beyond 3D reality and connect all the way with God's source and universal consciousness. But that's also why it's been co-opted as well into modern neo-Tantra, where its focus is on, sexuality. And so everything gets warped eventually. All the good ideas get warped by the negative faction of the Illuminati, because you have to realize these people use 100% of their brains. They are absolutely brilliant, and they can think it all the way through. It's like a computer. They can run simulations. They can figure it all the way through. They have a vision that reaches multi-generational, so they can think it through. And we are like the June fly in the middle of this thing, and we live these short, little, incredibly short lives, 100 years or less. I don't know hardly anybody who lives 100 years, but And it's getting shorter because they're polluting our environment with all this radiation from Fukushima and the GMO'd food and all the chemicals and the chemtrails. And so, this is a mass genocide program going on here. Okay.
Well, it is important to note that biblical accounts do correlate with the Anunnaki creation story. They were actually written in cuneiform tablets, and they outdate many religious texts. This is the confusing part, because this can be construed as, yes, we should believe it 100%. We should generalize the Anunnaki and say that they're all demons, or we should, it's like we're all really confused as to what's really going on with the Anunnaki story, just because some of it is written in the Bible, some of it was taken out of the Bible, that sort of thing.
Yeah, you're quite right. And what we find is that each one of these guys, just as though Mr. Putin and Dwight Eisenhower are both going to write histories of the world. Boy, they would have different versions of it. Well, it's exactly, all these guys have different sets of visions, but their chief, King Anu, basically got together with Enlil, Yahweh, and Enki, who's Adonai in the Bible, and Nimma, the sister, Mother Mary, as it were, archetype, and Ningishita, Christ, probably, and basically got together and said, listen, these humans must not be allowed to perish in the matrix of programming that our half-breeds have left. And you go back there and you do something about it. And what happened is Thoth, who's known in the New World as Kuklan, left and in 311 BC and said, I'll be back December 21st, 2012, and we're going to start to turn things around. Well, I don't know. Do you think things are turning around, Denise?
Well, I do. Wow. I'd like to address that, too, as well.
I'd like for you to address that. I really don't want to answer that question.
Well, I think it's turning around to the positive, yes, and I'll outline that as we go. But back to, the victors of war always survive to write the story. So we have all these variations on the theme. But one of the things that I learned when I was taken on board the mothership when I was 4 years old is that I was shown 24 different variations on this theme of 3D reality, Earth, human existence, right? So we are the observer participant, and we are the chooser. We can choose, so basically what I was shown, all these different varieties, and some were very negative, the planet blew up, and some were very positive, that there was a utopia, and then there was everything in between. Diverse we wish to experience. So that's why, it's interesting to argue semantics and debate this issue down to the minutia and try to figure out what is the truth, if there is such thing as the truth. There's a truth for each one of us. There's 7.5 billion personal truths. So what will work for the highest good, for the greatest good, for everyone, not just most of humanity? We're looking for the paradigm where we're not going to have some people suffering so that other people can benefit. There is a one for all multiverse that is out there, and so we're looking at this information from that perspective. I like the Anunnaki story. It gets us out of I was raised Christian. It gets us out of that modality, this Christian, Muslim, Jewish war that's going on, the three major factions. I think that's what Orwell was calling the three countries. Well, it's three major factions. That's playing out to such a perverse level that we're likely to nuke ourselves, but I think there's extraterrestrials that are going to prevent that. We are too important in the continuum. We are a biological experiment of the universe, and we have DNA that is from all over existence, and so I think we're too important to perish, and the experiment is for us to become conscious in the game. We're in a game, we're in a matrix, and we are waking up, becoming conscious, and then what will we co-create together? What outcome will we create which will serve all of humanity and the other beings and all the creatures and all the features and the planet herself? Go ahead.
Well, at one point, a group of the Anunnaki offered Eisenhower medical extension of life in exchange for a pledge to give up on nuclear weapons, and I turned it down. So we have been intervened with a number of times, as I look at the news that's coming in, by the Anunnaki that have come back to help us. I really see that things could have been a lot worse, and they're getting better because we've got some help.
Well, I agree. Reneged that he felt bad that he rejected that initially, and he came back when Valiant Thor came, and he wanted to accept the offer. And it was not just longevity or physical immortality, but it was green technologies. So we would be 1,000 years further along the line than we are right now. But the powers that be, the Anunnaki that are in control, or the Illuminati, whatever you call them, they said, no, you can't take this offer. So
they leaned on Ike.
They basically said, no, you want to live?
So it would basically be the Enlil faction of the Anunnaki that is the Illuminati?
Some people think so. Other people say, well, Enlil too may have learned a lot and may have no longer be opposed to our survival, because after all, we are descended from his father, from Anu, and through his brother, and it may be that it's not him at all, but it may be Nanar or the descendants of a lesser Anunnaki who's still on Earth. There's a lot of debate in the literature about it. The one who claims to be Allah might be one of these Anunnaki who's still here.
Well, what about Alalu as a key Illuminati player, since he was against Anu from the get-go?
Yeah, so this is the violence. This is represented as the violent streak, and the descendant of Alalu is Marduk directly. That's the energy, because Marduk's mother was Alalu's very daughter, and they married when Enki had a child with Damkina, the daughter of Alalu. That was Marduk, and he was supposed to follow Alalu to the throne in Nibiru. But then Anu overthrew Alalu and denied Marduk had any right to ever be king of Nibiru, and so he wasn't going to give him any good positions on Earth if he could avoid it too. And Enki promised Marduk, I'm going to help you get back what's due yours. You should be a king, and I'm going to help you do it. And however, Marduk went crazy as far as Enki was concerned, and said, "You're doing it too fast. You're going too much." And what happened? There was this nuclear exchange, basically, where the Sumerians wiped themselves out, but Marduk and his people managed to survive. And Enlil said, "Hey, leave this burned-out planet to Marduk. We quit." But not everybody left. Not all the Anunnaki left. Most of them did leave from the Tiahuanaco area. They had their takeoff at Nazca, atop the Andes, and most of them went back. But they keep needing more gold. Every time there's a nearing of Nibiru that causes them to lose some more of their gold shield. They come back to Earth for more and more because we got lots of it. And the Illuminati does supply that for them, but not only does it supply that for them, but it also has missiles aimed at them. And there's big things that's being negotiated right now, so we hear.
Therefore, the Illuminati could be descendants of Alalu, yes?
Correct, exactly. That's exactly what we're saying. It may be they.
Okay.
Because but see, these guys think in terms of genetics, and they think the Alalu strain, Alalu murdered the king. And so these guys are murderers built in. That's sort of
that's kind of the thinking.
Of it. Yeah.
So we're looking at, were the Anunnaki, okay, just because you have a Alalu in your blood doesn't mean you're going to turn out to be an evil person. It does seem that Anu had some prejudice against the Alalu line. Yes. He didn't like Alalu. He wrestled him several times.
Alalu bit off his manhood.
Yeah, bit off his penis.
That's a great story.
And so, he was trying to deal with that the best he could. He married his son, kind of sacrificed his son, and married Enki off to Damkina, the daughter of Alalu, and promised that Marduk. But I think at some point, Anu just said, screw this. I'm going to have my family. So, Enlil himself isn't that such a nice character, so is that their personality? Now, the other theory, and these are all hypotheses, is, and this has been told to us from, in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, who is Nigashita, who is Enki's son, and he became enlightened. He encountered the Watchers, the Galzu, that reside in the center of the earth, and they apparently are within every sphere. When you go down into the earth, it starts going interdimensional. So we're getting the story of interdimensionals and their interactions with 3D reality. And they were very enlightened, and they had the totality of the continuum in their reality. And so they were able to teach Thoth how to dissolve down to its molecular structure and travel throughout the universe. And Thoth has become it was known as Nigashita at the time, and he become their acolyte, and they studied with them for a great time, and then he became enlightened. He was able to do this, and he said that he was going to, his work in the world from that point on was to help humanity become conscious. Now, one of the things he warned us about, excuse me, is that there are these interdimensionals that are very dark and negative, and they sneak into the council and they take over the council members, and that's kind of ties us in with the David Icke information. Are these rulers possessed by these interdimensionals? Who are they? Well, they call them the Archons. It was very interesting. Star Trek very first series, Gene Roddenberry was trying to tell us a lot of stuff with that series. You got to look at it. He had an episode called Return of the Archons. So the Archons apparently are these ancient interdimensionals who are definitely on the dark side of the continuum. And so they have their agenda. And maybe we're dealing with the Illuminati, the Anunnaki, who are now the Illuminati, who were taken over or possessed in some way by these dark beings, and that might be the whole story around David Icke's reptilian shapeshifters, and they call them kind of snake-like or reptilian in nature. And so that's what we're dealing with. Is we're not 100% sure. We are researchers. We're investigating. We're in the matrix just like everybody else, and we're looking at all this information, and it's coming into us all the time, so we can decipher what's going on and figure it out ourselves. So that is the question: who is the top of the matrix, the all-seeing eye, and the dollar bill? What I see is the Statue of Liberty resembles Utu Shamash, who is Inanna's twin brother. And you think it's a woman, but if you look at the Statue of Liberty, she's kind of androgynous. So I have an image. I'm going to try to find it again where we put the Statue of Liberty in Shamash, and he's wearing the exact same headdress. So that might be a clue there. And then the other thing is Inanna's is her symbol is the owl. And so Inanna is probably the owl at the Bohemian Grove, and of course the Washington D.C. What you see is is under the shape of the owl, as David Icke showed us in his graphic. So, is it the Andalites? I think so. and because Inanna is Enlil's granddaughter, and Utu is his grandson. So I think but are they in alignment with their grandfather, or are they in opposition? We're not 100% sure.
Well, from my perspective, you can. I look at the universe as perhaps being holographic, so that everything that is to some degree in each of us, and we're in each and everything. And just like it's in everyone to be wise, it's also whatever we're calling the dark side is a part of each of our own personalities, and so that it's really interesting to just wonder if we each have an archon within, or an archonic archetype that has some information for us, and maybe there's a place we can approach this that goes beyond dichotomous good versus bad, and say we're all part of the same thing, and can we synergize?
Well, the beautiful thing about all of this is that
the Anunnaki believed in the creator of all, who created the species that the Anunnaki used to create us. So humans are unique in that we're derived from 50% Anunnaki and 50% the creator of all.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're really kind of special that way.
And we really are thankful to our contact with Bigfoot, Sasquatch, because their genes have been entered into our genome too, and there's a sort of strength and wisdom and intuitive, nonverbal communication that we are capable of, and that expands as we honor that part of ourselves too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, DNA has been turned off on purpose, switched off. Our inherent abilities of telepathic communication have been switched off. So what we're finding is that some people are able to activate their own DNA through meditation and spiritual practices. And so this is evolving, and also we have, these crystal children, and these children are coming in and they have greater abilities than those that are kind of more ingrained in the matrix and can't figure the way out of it.
It's really interesting to think, if this sort of way of looking at things is so that if we can imagine we each had an Anunnaki within us, that we had people from this military dictatorship that are coming to this paradise on Earth, and what it would be like if we are, and from there, imagine you're a remote viewer, that you're actually stepping into the story of the Anunnaki, and allow that to show you by your remote viewing what our real history is.
That would be beautiful, wouldn't
it? And let the show know what you get.
Yeah. All right. Do you have a question for us? I'm sorry, we were just downloading.
Well, Dr. Lessin, I know you worked right alongside with Mr. Sitchin.
Oh, yeah, I sat at his feet, let's put it that way.
That's so exciting.
It's like, he was so available to conversation. You could ask him anything and he would respond, and he would dig out all kinds of evidence. He had this huge collection of these itty-bitty tablets that he had blown up big enough to really see, and he could read this stuff, and he would just research stuff all the time.
Yeah, we were fortunate to be part of his first certification program. And what was it, 1998, the Prophets Conference, they were the ones that sponsored it. And so we followed and went to everything he did from 98 until about, 2006 or something. He started getting really sick, and he wasn't able to travel or do long presentations. He could do no more than an hour or two at a time. So when he was getting really aged, so we didn't go, because he lived in New York City. We're over here in Maui.
I had just given up on anthropology, ever answering some questions about how come they were finding all these old skeletons, way older in atop the Andes, when humans weren't even supposed to have crossed over the Bering Strait, and then there was this, the temple walls at Abydos with helicopters and airplanes and rocket ships on them, and incredible when you start then looking at the myths of this guy with a computer taking 4 great big boatloads of people across to South America. All this stuff that anthropology would just absolutely not look at. And particularly what was making me mad is for 140 years the anthropologists kept looking for some kind of missing link that would show how we went from these little Australopithecine, a different kind of hominoid than we are, to suddenly people like us, and that everything had to evolve gradually in this totally false model of evolution, which had become the religion of the academics. But there is no missing link. They never found it because there isn't any. The Anunnaki created us from their genome, adding a little copper, a little of the minerals of Africa, and a few genes from this proto-Neanderthal we call Homo erectus. That's how we got here, and we were carried in the womb of Nibiran women, and our main ancestor was carried in the womb of Nimma.
Great.
Well,
I just wanted to add, Dr. Lessin has his PhD in anthropology from UCLA, and then he has a master's in psychology. And so when I met Sasha in 1997, I stuck the book The Gods of Eden by William Bromley on the back of the toilet seat, which is a favorite place for people to read, by the way. And one day he came running out and he says, "Do you know what this is?" And I said, "Yes." And he says, "Is there more?" And so we went down and bought every one of Sitchin's books that we could find and ordered the rest that weren't on the shelves when Borders was still alive. And, so that from then on, he was obsessed. He found, that he went full circle back to his beginning. And so, for like 7 years, he was writing the first book, and I go, honey, let's get this book out. Come on. Let's get this book out. So that was, Anunnaki Gods No More. And then our second book is, Anunnaki Legacy of the Gods. I started adding what I'm getting. I don't want to call it a channel. I basically download. I'm there. I don't set myself aside and I don't know what's going on. I contact the inexperiencer. You and I have had some talks offline here.
Yes.
And I've been connected to this information since the crib. I've always had interactions with interdimensionals, extraterrestrials, and ghosts and all kinds of things, and I've spent my lifetime sorting it out. And when I met Dr. Lessin, he's a therapist. I just went into analysis about this all because it so adversely affected my family. They were living on an interdimensional portal. There were interdimensionals and all kinds of sightings right there in my neighborhood, especially in my house. And my mother went schizophrenic. She didn't know how to handle that. And then the kids, we had to finally get real with each other, have conversations about what was going on in our house. I've had psychics to the house, and now we have experiencers that are talking about abductions and contact. And what we're doing in the UFO field is going back to the 50s, because in those days we had a lot of people that were having conscious contact. That's when Billy Myers started. That's when we have Valiant Thor and, I forget some of the names, and so we're looking at this, like, what was going on? They were having contact, and then the government started shutting it down, and now we're going back to having conscious contact. There was a rescue at
Dulce, too. That was a really important event.
Right, yeah.
Dulce.
You want to tell her about Dulce?
Connected with the Anunnaki?
Anunnaki, a so-called reptilian, actually intervened and helped President Carter's Delta Force rescue some of the hostages, anyway, that were at the intergalactic brothel that the Greys were running down underneath Dulce.
Yeah,
the story goes.
They had a breeding experiment. Phil Schneider died because he leaked this, and so that was what's his name? Mark Richards. Mark Richards is in jail for the rest of his life because he's a whistleblower. So a lot of people have sacrificed their lives and their freedom to get the stories out there, and we're investigating them. And I don't think it was a reptilian; it was an Anunnaki. I think it was just a reptilian. We have a lot of species that are here, have been interacting with our military, and I was on a military base from 95 to 97, and I had some experiences with the Greys, and I was taken to an underwater installation, and I saw about 1,000, I'd say, although I wasn't counting, Anunnaki, the tall whites. Yeah.
Well, there are two questions I'd like to ask you before we go to our break. I watched an interview with Jordan Maxwell and Zechariah Sitchin. Okay. Now, Zechariah Sitchin, it's actually kind of a rare interview. I saw that there were only about 1,000 viewers to this fascinating interview. Now, Zechariah Sitchin himself states that the Elohim in the Bible were the Anunnaki, and it was the Anunnaki that were born on Earth who married the daughters of Adam. These were his words. And I'll just let you think about that for a while before we go on a break.
Oh, I could answer that immediately.
Well, I think she wants to go on a break.
Oh.
Yeah,
okay.
I want to go on a break so that we can hear from our sponsor, and let's connect here in a few minutes.
All right.
All right.
We'll see you in a few minutes. Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, back from our break, Beyond Ordinary News with Janet and Sasha Lessin. Okay, well, we were talking about the Elohim. Anybody want to comment on that?
We'd love to comment. Yes, this is indeed the Anunnaki, and they are hybrids. And here's how this came about. It was like a person named Marduk, as we said, who was once to be king of Nibiru, lost his job when his supposed successor, Alalu, was overthrown. And so Marduk, realizing he was never going to make it back in Nibiruan society, declared his alliance with us Earthlings by marrying Sarpanit, who was herself a woman who had been bred with matings between Earthling women and the Nibiruans, the Anunnaki. And so at Marduk's wedding, so Anu, the king of Nibiru, says, sure, let him marry, let him stay on Earth. He'll never come back here then. He can marry as long as he'll promise never to return to Nibiru. And so he let him marry. And so Marduk had this thing all planned up with Shamgaz, who was head of the Igigi astronauts that were at Mars base. And so they came down for the wedding of Marduk and Sarpanit. And so as soon as they left the wedding to go for their honeymoon in Africa, these astronauts, these great big guys, each seized one of these special house slaves, the Earthlings that had been privileged to be at Marduk's wedding. And they took 200 of these beautiful women back to the landing platform at Lebanon. They seized all of Enlil's master computer programs and said, we got the missiles, and you're going to recognize our marriages. And when Enlil started to hesitate about it, Marduk said, you better recognize him. And Enlil realized that he was powerless. He was cut off from the home planet because the Igigi had the landing platform. He said, okay, I'll manage him. But what he was planning, they knew after a while that the flood was, when Antarctica was, ice cap was going to slip into the South Sea, was going to flood everything. He said, let them die too. I'm tired. It's an illegal race. We're not supposed to have any slaves. I can't stand it that there's millions of them. We're in danger. And furthermore, those damn rebellious astronauts have all bred and have great big clans of these hybrids, and they're especially living in by Jericho. Let them all drown. Well, King Anu wrote, beam back, you got to at least warn them and let them go for the high ground. And so some of them did go to the high ground, and there were others that disobeyed the order that they drowned. But that's what happened now. So that's the main deal about how that happened. But all these Anunnaki lords practiced the rite of the first night, which is the Lord. That means the Anunnaki guy gets to deflower the bride before her groom does. And that really used to piss people off about Gilgamesh, for example, the king of Uruk. But that was the deal that these guys inflicted on their populace.
Yeah, they had a caste class system. So the Anunnaki had their, they looked their nose down on other classes. So the Igigi were stationed on Mars. They were probably not of the royal class. And so they were more like the workers or the military. And so they just weren't as high ranking. They were so obsessed with bloodlines and ranking. They would rank the royals. They would give them, based on firstborn of the legal wife or the firstborn of the concubine. And so that was part of the whole thing there. So could you repeat what you said that Jordan Maxwell and Zechariah said or what Zechariah said in his interview about the distinction he had on the Elohim?
Well, there's an interview out with Jordan Maxwell interviewing Zechariah Sitchin, where Sitchin states that the Elohim in the Bible were the Anunnaki. It was the Anunnaki born on earth who married the daughters of Adam, is what he said.
Okay, so he's saying that that's daughters of Adam can be anybody, yeah.
Yep.
So there was a whole group of Anunnaki that were born here. There were some that came and settled here. And so that might be a distinction. That's why they have the different names, Gigi, Elohim. I don't know. So
no. The Elohim was just a general word for the ambassadors or representatives of the ruling expedition, Anunnaki gold mining expedition to Earth. They were in charge of this whole operation.
So they were full-blooded Anunnaki.
Yeah, well, in looking at the history of what happens, there were the original mine workers. These were called the descendants of Adamu and Tiamat, the first breeding pair. And they were in Africa, and for 100,000 years, these were the people. They adapted. They developed the skin melanin to make them darker and darker. They were the ancestors of the Bantu people of Africa, and that's what developed in Africa. In the meantime, Enki kept every generation making babies with the girls, and they would get lighter and lighter. And the other side of it was that what the original female was a blonde, adapted Adamite even was a blonde, blue-eyed female. So you have these different strains.
That was my next question. My next question was, what human race does the Anunnaki most resemble?
Go ahead, Janet.
Well, they were called the Shining Ones. So they had light hair, blonde or sandy brown, or red, a lot of red, and they had the fair eyes, like green, like blue-green. There are rumors or stories of some with gold eyes. But the darker eyes and the darker skin and the darker hair coloring were more human.
Your gal was bald.
Now, this question comes up quite a bit in my circle because, we do talk about the Anunnaki quite a bit, and we do talk about how human civilization began in Mesopotamia and basically should look African.
The particular Adamites that were working in the villas and palaces of the Anunnaki kept having babies. The maids kept having babies with the boss and his kids, right? Every generation, and they got lighter and lighter and lighter. And especially by the time you get down to Enki, together with his overseer's wife, which was one of these bred into fair-skinned Middle Eastern-looking people, you get the results, which is Noah, who looks like the people of the Middle East look right now. And there's Noah and his...
Well, Noah was fair hair and skin, and they turned to him and said to the mother, Batanash, and they said, "Are you in
astronauts?"
The astronauts? And she said no, because she was doing it with Enki himself. So she was lying, but she had made a baby with the god, Enki.
Well, according to the Atrahasis account, Noah, the king of Shuruppak, was Enki's son?
That's right. He was the son of Enki. What happened was that's the wife of Lumach, who was working for Enki as overseer. And Enlil at this time was trying to kill the humans out by making them work, just like Hitler did, for more and more labor each day and less rations of food. And they were starting to die. But he was making Enlil was making Lumach enforce this on the humans. The humans said they're going to kill Lumach, and so Enlil sent Lumach because he knew he liked Batanash. He sent Lumach off to protect himself by staying with Marduk. And he sent Batanash to his sister Nimah's house, and then he visited her. And they had a lot of fun, and they made Noah. And Noah's father knew darn well that Lumok's father knew darn well that wasn't Lumok's baby, but he basically said, "Shut up! This is an important person. It might save us all. Just keep your mouth shut and accept this." That's what happened.
Okay. All right. So, wow, very interesting. So, do you see a movie coming out of all this?
Yes, I see a number of movies.
Well, we're actually doing a sort of zeitgeist on it.
Yeah, we're doing a documentary. They're going to be interviewing us, and then the animate part of it, and they're going to do some live action. And I do see this turning into a screenplay, which is going to be a full-on production. I don't know who's going to do it. We need a Spielberg or someone, not Lucas. He turns everything into wars, but somebody, maybe J.J., what's his name, Abrams. Someone will take this information. Maybe, I don't know. Hollywood keeps blocking it. There was a movie out a few years ago. They were trying to get it out a few years ago, back in the middle, around 2004 or 5, and it was called One Anunnaki. That thing has disappeared.
The thing is to not be dependent on the financial support of those that are trying to suppress the message.
Yes.
And that's why the internet frees us from this, because there's so many points of information dispersal. And so if we forget about helping the movie moguls make their millions, we can mentor our minds.
In terms of funding acquisition for this documentary, in terms of finances, how would you go about it? Funding
they're already funded. They're already funded. They've contacted us, and
we're rolling.
And we're rolling.
Wow, that's fantastic.
They're just waiting for us to do. We're doing a little bit more research. We're working on. It's probably going to be 2.5 hours long, and
looks like we have the astronomer Andy Lloyd on board with us.
Right. They've got. They're probably going to. They started with one movie, and now they're going to do two or three. They've got. David Icke and Michael Tellinger and us and now Andy Lloyd, the astronomer, and
Michael
Tessarin, and there's a couple others I can't think of right now. And so this is going to be huge, and they're using an alternative. It's going to be like in on iTunes, and there's another one, can't think of what they mentioned. It'll be in the Walmarts. So this is an alternative way of getting films out there. It'll be in your local store.
Yeah, we really want the information out. That's what we want, this shared as widely as possible.
Okay, well, or how would they go about resolving the issue that there are different translations that came out of?
Oh, that would be so much fun.
Text.
That's
Yes.
a great idea. What you do is you show, well, from this guy's perspective, or Duke's perspective, it's this. Poor Debussy accidentally getting killed. From Inanna's perspective, she sees him getting him killed, and you could actually have all the different views represented, and that would make it way more fun, dramatically, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's kind of like a game that has all the different outcomes. Yeah, it is, which one we pick. It's kind of like, I didn't see the new Noah film, but eventually somebody picks a perspective and just puts it out there, and if somebody else disagrees, they can always do their own film.
Yeah, I just saw that movie.
What did you think?
I do think there were some little Anunnaki connotations to it.
Oh, really?
The only thing is they kind of left me wondering who Cain is.
Oh, we know who Cain is.
Who's Cain, honey?
Oh, Cain, the very first children that came out of the special human, Adapa, that Damkina and Enki made, were twins, Cain and Abel. And one was trained in animal husbandry, and the other trained in crops. And one killed the other, and the other was genetically marked and sent off to the east, and ultimately his descendants wound up in Lake Titicaca as the Indians that the Anunnaki populated most of that part of Central and South America with.
But weren't they genetically altered so they couldn't grow beards, something like that?
That was their marker. That was the marker. That's a very interesting thing. Michael Tessarin points out, well, to whom were they being marked? What it says in the Bible, so that they wouldn't be killed by mistake. Who would kill them? When you meet somebody new, why would you think, has that person been marked as a descendant of the gods? If you didn't know that, and what is this nonsensical Bible? The more you start looking at things in depth, you see that the story of Cain is just a big mix-up, and what happened is that This was the violent strain that these guys said, let's get these guys out of here. They're all violent. And for the next 8 generations, every single one of Cain's successors was killed by his kids. And these are violent people. And that's why they wanted to get rid of him. But when Adapa was dying, the father, Ninurta, who was a prime minister, the enforcer underneath Enlil, came in his airplane. He brought Cain back, and Adapa felt his face and said, "Okay, your descendants are going to be around for a long time, and take them back and let them develop in the North American hemisphere."
Wow, fantastic! Thank you for answering my question. I was wondering who he really was.
Well, what did they say in the movie that he was?
Basically, in the movie, there's a part where Cain, right before he dies, says, "The humans are going to live and made in my own image."
Oh, okay.
Or something like that. So it kind of makes you wonder, wow, is he Enlil or what's going on here,
Yeah, I think that ultimately the agents of Marduk, and Marduk had spent a lot of time in North America when he was in exile, for killing Dumuzi. So when he was basically energizing the people that later became the Aztec and ran Ningishita, his brother's people, out of Central America, out of Mexico, out of Central America. They made their last stand in Colombia, and finally they retreated all the way to Tiahuanaco and then took off from Nazca.
Sasha, I know that you and Clark sort of differ in your idea as to who Marduk is. You believe that Marduk is Allah, yes?
I think that that it could be. The jury's out for me. Marduk. Here's the arguments for both sides. Nanar is an excellent candidate because he was given that area by Enlil, the area we call Canaan, and he left after the great nuclear holocaust of 24 BCE, but a priestess of his in the city of Haran found a communicator in one of Nanar's garments and was able to contact him and actually get him to return to Earth. So this is the area where Muhammad was grabbed by a god who was strangling him, saying, "You better do what I said, or I'm going to kill you." And so it could be Nanar, and it makes total sense. And I understand what Gerald Clark is saying, and I think he's got a great argument. The other argument.
Well, that's the symbol, right? The moon and the star.
The other thing is that Marduk's behavior, just looking at the level of behavior, where he was so opposed to Allah or Enlil, and that was his big obsession. And you look at today, what's happening is that whoever Allah is against the Christians and Jews who are into Yahweh in the way that they are. And so that's why it just seems to point to Marduk. The truth is, I don't know, but I think that Gerald has made a very convincing argument that, and right now in my mind, Nanar seems to be a better candidate than Marduk. But I will tell you that some people have said it's both Enlil. He's pretending to be two different gods and play himself against himself so that the humans never realize it's really him on top.
And isn't Nanar of the house of Enlil, right? He's one of the
Absolutely.
sons of Enlil.
He's the first legal son. And there's a little difficulty with that because Nanar, and who's the prime minister and the guy with the real power and the heir to Enlil, is not going to get put aside by Nanar. And they've almost come to wars several times.
Fascinating. Now, Janet, I do have a really interesting question for you.
Sure.
I love the way you answered this in one of your previous interviews. Well, there's a story where Enki sacrificed a god, Yahweh, in order to transfer his soul to create human beings. Can you expound on that a little bit?
You know, it makes sense on some level, and it doesn't on another level when I'm looking at it right now. But I think that what I track down is after I think that the Anunnaki are coming down through their humans. They're choosing to incarnate because Thoth is a thrice-born Hermes, and so that's part of behind why Gerald Clark thinks that Thoth is Jesus, and so do I. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the story about the Emerald Tablets, what Thoth said is that his body lies in the halls of Amenti in stasis, and he's able to send his consciousness down through the womb to reanimate, to reincarnate into form as a human baby. So he walks through the world as a human, and how better can you know your people than to walk amongst them. So that's what the story is there. So I think that he's here, and so we know about Tuva's incarnation, and I just uncovered this last night. Hermes created the Hermetic religion, or belief structure, philosophy. It's a philosophy. It's not really religion. We're not creating a religion over it, which is a philosophy. Mm-hmm. And in the Nag Hammadi scriptures that they just uncovered and have translated, Jesus was teaching the Hermetic philosophy. So if Jesus was a modern incarnation of Thoth, of Hermes, then it makes sense to me. I mean, he could, Sasha, Dr. Lessin pointed out, he could just have followed that concept and adapted it as his philosophy. But that's when we look at behavior and philosophy. We're trying to sort out who is whom. And the philosophy of Jesus and of Thoth and of Enki and of Nima was love and respecting consciousness and loving humanity.
Yeah, it's the opposite of the God-fearing and obeying. I mean, basically, Jesus was saying love, and Yahweh was saying obey or die. And so that's a huge dichotomy, and that's the same kind of thing that the Buddha comes up with, that all the the enlightened human beings, and I can tell you, I'm a professional anthropologist, there are enlightened human beings in every culture. They may symbol how they're doing it differently, but they all come to the perennial philosophy that there's a basic connection with every consciousness, and that connection, if you experience it phenomenologically, that's love. You love every consciousness, and it all loves you, and you are one.
Yeah, and so Gardner's been saying, and I've been reading it, and I haven't, no, he's dead, but he said in his book that Jesus' major fault was that he was there to promote equality of the Gentiles with the Jews. And like we said earlier, the Anunnaki and the society they spawned was very caste oriented. So that was a big no-no. The Jews had a stronghold on this whole area because they had been, they're the chosen ones. They are of the Yahweh line. And they were very strict in their rules of when you would procreate. They controlled it down to that level. You could get engaged in September, and then you had 3 months of apart of celibacy, and then you could mate in December. And so Jesus was born at the wrong time. So that was his big thing. He came into the world. He was born at the wrong time because of and this is what they do with the Amish. I used to observe the Amish. They're only allowed to date in the summer. They all get married at the same time, and so the children it's not quite as rigid, but the Jewish people at that time, those that were really in the faith, they were very strict about this birth process. I don't know why, what the logic is behind it. Let me finish one more thing. So at his wedding, Jesus had Gentiles, and it was his wedding. The wedding was not somebody else's; it was his wedding. And they had two weddings. They had the
who was he marrying?
Mary Magdalene, and and so they were only going to serve wine to the Jewish men that had their circumcisions, and Jesus said, no, we're going to serve everybody. Jew and Gentile alike, whoever wants it. And so he was just a rebel, and he was defying everything, but he was, he has to be of the Yankee clan because he was about equality and raising up everybody, seeing everybody's equal. Go ahead, Sash. He's jumping out of his seat. Go ahead.
Go ahead with your story. I want to jump back to something else about being the chosen people. Do you have any more you want to say about Jesus?
Well, yes, I do. Going back to the transmigration of souls, was that the beginning of reincarnation? And was Jesus reincarnated? Is he part of the Enki line through Ningshita, or how does all that tie in together?
Reincarnation is, and always has been, always will be. That's part of the continuum. And we reincarnate in many planets, and sometimes we're simultaneously in many levels. the more advanced or old a soul is, they become aware of their multidimensional selves and their simultaneous incarnation. Time is an illusion of 3D reality of this earth, so there's levels of awareness. As for Thoth and Jesus, they started to be able to figure out how to bring souls back to life. Not Jesus, Enki. Enki was able to revive Inanna when she was killed. So they were able to revive the dead. So that's pretty big, right? 3D
Absolutely.
people reviving the dead. They figured that one out. And so when Thoth negotiated became a Galzu, became this enlightened watcher species, he mastered how to send his body wherever he wanted to. And that's part of the Hermetic practice, is becoming conscious. You can manifest a body. We are interviewing Olnek, who is a woman whose soul was incarnated on Venus, and she came to the earth, and part of what they did was they manifested a body for her to come into, so she has a human body. So that is, creating form beyond the birth process. So apparently there are species, there are beings in this universe that can control on that level, and that's what Thoth learned to do. And of course he was very close to Enki and Nimma, and I'm sure that they all, because they were the scientists together, and they knew it as well. And so my theory is, if I just take this logically, I think that they are walking among us now, because we are their people. And probably Mary was probably Nimma. Nimma is the precursor of the word mama, and is a precursor of the word Mary. So you see Mary as Mary Magdalene, you see Mary as Mother Mary. It might have been the same soul. Souls can be more than one place at once. These people were instrumental in creating a paradigm which has basically shifted humanity, and that's what they wanted to do. Enki wanted to take back his reality because it had fallen into his brother Enlil, or whoever it was it the Archons that had taken over his brother? There's some level they loved each other, and some level, just like siblings, they hated each other, and they had to work out this dynamic, and we are in the middle of a big sibling rivalry.
What Janet was saying about the Jews being the chosen one, this is something that Zechariah Sitchin and I have both gone into in a great deal of detail. It came down to is that one of the descendants of the line of earthlings that was working for Enlil was a guy named Terah. He was the high priest, the educated man that ran things in the city of Enlil's son, Nanar. The city was named Ur. And Enlil needed a general to help him control Canaan, because Marduk and his allies were starting to move on Canaan and the new space center they wanted to make in Sinai. And so he groomed Abraham, the son of Terah, and had him go to Haran and have this great big tremendous cavalry, and he was the man that he sent him to spy on Sodom and Gomorrah, the cities on the south end of the Salt Sea, as it was then called, Sodom and Gomorrah and another city, to see if they'd gone over to Marduk and his son Nabu, who was trying to capture the spaceport on Sinai. And then he warned Abraham and Lot after they spied and said, those guys are over. They've got over to Marduk. And so Yahweh, Enlil sent Ninurta and Nergal and said, get out of here quick, because we're gonna nuke the place. And so they voted on it in Enlil's council, and then they nuked Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities south of the Salt Sea, which then became the Dead Sea. And they nuked the runway at Sinai, and all of Sinai is still poisonous with radiation and Terza, the kind of soil that you get. And Lot's wife, who turned back, wasn't turned to salt. She was vaporized, just like the poor ladies in Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
Fascinating. Wow. Thank you so much. How do people find you?
All right. We have enkispeaks.com is our primary website, ENKISPEAKS.com. And you can write to us via that website. We also have Aquarian Radio, because Enki was Aquarius. AquarianRadio.com. This is the age of Aquarius, and you can write to us at aquarianradio@gmail.com. And we'd love to hear your feedback. We're on Facebook. We have a huge web presence. That's what we do all the time. We're here to help humanity ascend, become enlightened and conscious, because I'm really I'm bored of war. I'm a counselor. I hear people all the time, they're starving, their lives aren't very fulfilling because they're in deep economic stress. I've lost about 3 or 4 friends this year, way before their time, to cancer and diseases. All these diseases are curable, and the green technologies are here. As a global community, if we just keep at it, we will eventually bring down the veil. The Wizard of Oz's curtain will come down, and we will see that the Emperor has no clothes.
I'd say when you're looking at the paradigm, whether should you be pessimistic or optimistic. Let's say you're optimistic, and what you want to happen happens, groovy. But let's say you're optimistic, and it doesn't happen that way, and you get killed instead. At least you had a good time till then, so carpe diem.
Is there anything else you want the listeners to know?
I think that's about it for today. It's been a wonderful show. Thank you so much for having us on.
Thank you so much for coming on to my show. I really appreciate it, and I really hope to meet the two of you in person very soon.
Oh, I do want to say one thing. We have a conference coming up. It's June 7th to 8th, and it's in San Diego at the Convention Center. We are presenting at it. We're not producing it, but the producers are at Anunnaki of Nibiru. ANUNNAKIOFNIBIRU.com. AnunnakiofNibiru.com. They have a Facebook page. The seats are at a super early bird special of $77, I think. Anyway, I'm putting that up on my websites. You might be able to find the link there. But Anunnaki of Nibiru, it's probably the first annual. And I hope Denise, that you and whoever you want to bring can come. And love to meet you there. Maybe we can do a broadcast or 2 or 3 from there.
Absolutely. That sounds like quite the idea.
All right.
Well, the two of you have a fantastic evening, and again, thank you so much for coming on to Beyond Ordinary News Radio.
Thank you, and aloha.
Aloha.